In the quiet hours of the night, history's long forgotten whispers drift through darkened palace halls. By the soft glow of candlelight, secrets that were swept under ornate rugs begin to stir. Imagine wandering through echoing corridors of ancient courts, where every marble statue and oil portrait has silently witnessed dramas never written in official chronicles. In this gentle journey, we will walk beside those who stood in the shadows of thrones. We will listen to their hushed voices and heartfelt confessions, uncovering the hidden side of royal life that history tried to erase. This will not be a tale of grand battles or loud triumphs. Instead, it is a collection of quiet stories, like faded diary pages, revealing the private hopes and sorrows of kings and queens, princes and consorts. With a calm and respectful tone, we explore the inner chambers of courts from centuries past. We will meet a young lady in waiting guarding a dangerous secret, a physician who keeps vigil in a royal bedchamber, and a chronicler deciding what truths to omit for the sake of a dynasty's image. These fictional narratives are woven from real histories, each thread grounded in the customs and events of its time. Settle in comfortably as we begin this slow, immersive stroll through palaces and harems, bedchambers, and gardens. You may hear the distant chiming of clocks in Versailles or the rustle of silks in the Forbidden City's moonlight. We speak in whispers so as not to disturb the sleeping figures of the past. Let the gentle cadence of these stories guide you toward rest, even as you learn about the intimate hidden facets of royal history. Our journey starts in medieval Europe, where under the cover of night, a forbidden rendezvous is about to unfold. Medieval France, whispers in the tower. A lone oil lamp burns in a high stone chamber, casting dancing shadows on cold walls. It is a spring night in Paris, 1314. Within the Tower of Nesle by the Seine, a young lady-in-waiting stands guard, her heart thumping gently in her chest. Her name is Juliet, and at just 17, she has already learned that court life demands silence and secrecy. Tonight, she keeps watch at a heavy wooden door while her mistress, a royal princess, meets with a forbidden visitor beyond it. Through the cracks in the door, Juliet hears soft laughter and whispered endearments. The princess, the king's own daughter-in-law, is murmuring to a man who is not her husband. Juliet's cheeks flush as she strains not to listen, fixing her eyes on the dark corridor instead. The air in the tower stairway is cool and smells of moss and aged stone. Far below, the river's slow currents lap against the tower's base, a soothing rhythm under the distant hum of nighttime Paris. Juliet focuses on that gentle sound to calm her nerves. She knows how dangerous these midnight trysts are. If discovered, the cost would be ruinous for all involved. Yet in the dimness, Juliet cannot help but smile sadly. She has seen how lonely her mistress has been in her arranged marriage to the king's eldest son. Court rumor says the prince spends more time with his hunting and games than with his wife. The princess, still in the bloom of youth, yearns for affection and understanding. She has sought companionship in the arms of a kind and handsome knight, a man who treats her like a cherished woman rather than a political pawn. As her lady-in-waiting and closest confidant, Juliet has covered for these secret meetings for months. She has carried furtive letters sealed with wax and delivered subtle messages between the lovers, all under the noses of watchful courtiers. Each act of assistance feels to Juliet like a small rebellion against a life governed by duty and dynastic politics. In those moments, she isn't just a servant obeying orders, she is a friend helping to kindle a little warmth in the cold halls of power. Tonight is perhaps the last of such meetings before spring gives way to summer, and the royal family moves back to the main palace. Juliet holds the lamp aloft, listening for any sign of disturbance. Each tick of time feels elongated. She notices the intricate tapestry hanging opposite her, woven with golden fleurs de lis, and lets her mind drift over its pattern. The delicate threads form a repeating motif that calms her. She counts the lilies in the design to steady her breathing. It is a ritual she's developed whenever her duty is to stand guard like this. Down below, a bell from a distant church tower tolls softly. The hour is growing late. Juliet taps lightly on the door, once, then twice, a prearranged signal that they must soon part. The murmurs inside cease. A moment later, the door opens just a sliver, and the princess slips out, adjusting her silk mantle. Her cheeks are flushed rose, and her eyes bright with the mix of happiness and worry that always follows these encounters. The knight remains in the shadows of the room, unseen by Juliet, but she knows he watches with concern. Juliet gently takes her mistress's hand. In the lantern's glow, the princess's face, normally composed and regally distant by day, now looks young and uncertain. "All is well, madam," Juliet whispers reassuringly. She peeks down the stairwell. It remains empty. With hushed steps, the two women begin their descent. Behind them, the knight will wait and leave separately, later in the night, by a servant's postern door leading to the riverbank. It has all been carefully planned to avoid notice. As they descend the spiral stairs, Juliet's thoughts drift to the beginning of this affair. She remembers a twilight months ago, standing in the princess's chambers at dusk, brushing her mistress's dark hair by lamplight. Suddenly, the princess had burst into quiet tears. Between soft sobs, the young royal woman confessed her desperation and loneliness in a marriage that was only a show. She wept that she felt like a bird in a gilded cage, admired by all yet aching inside from solitude. Juliet, moved by pity and loyalty, had knelt and taken the princess's hands, promising to help however she could. That night, a secret pact was formed between servant and mistress. From that day forward, each covert letter passed, each door Juliet guarded became an act of compassion. The girl who once only minded the queen's gowns and jewels now found herself minding her very heart. And in doing so, Juliet discovered a sense of purpose. She could give her lady a few moments of genuine joy in a world that demanded sacrifice of personal happiness. They reach the bottom of the tower, where a narrow courtyard lies open to the starry sky. The spring air is cool on their faces. For a brief moment, the princess pauses and tilts her head upward. Juliet follows her gaze. Above, a thin crescent moon hangs, veiled by wisps of cloud. The princess smiles faintly at the night sky, perhaps offering a silent prayer that her love remains safe and undiscovered. In that fragile moonlight, Juliet sees not a high-born princess, but a young woman full of hope and fear, clutching her cloak tight around trembling shoulders. No words are exchanged as they make their way from the tower into a covered walkway leading back to the main palace residence. Only once they are safely within the lantern-lit corridor of the palace does the princess speak, her voice barely above a breath. "Thank you," she says, squeezing Juliet's arm gently. Juliet simply nods respectfully and whispers, "Rest well, Your Highness." Both of them know they must act as though nothing is amiss. The princess glides down the corridor to her chambers, where her other ladies doze on pallets awaiting her return. Juliet remains behind a moment, watching until her mistress's door closes. She exhales, unaware she'd been holding her breath. The encounter went smoothly this night, as on all the nights before. Perhaps Juliet dares to hope their secret will remain forever tucked away, like a love letter hidden in the lining of a jewelry box. But court life is rarely so simple. In the following weeks, a subtle unease begins to permeate the palace. Juliet notices the king's only daughter, Princess Isabella of England, eyeing her sisters-in-law with peculiar scrutiny. Isabella, sharp and perceptive, has a knack for sensing when something is awry. One afternoon, as Juliet assists her mistress with embroidery in a sunlit parlor, Isabella presents gifts to her three sisters-in-law, exquisitely embroidered silk purses, one for each of the young wives of the king's sons. Juliet admires the fine needlework and the apparent kindness of the gesture. The princess accepts hers with polite gratitude, unaware of the significance this little purse will soon take on. Late one evening, not long after, Juliet hears urgent whispers in the halls. Something is happening. Guards and messengers rush about with faces set in grim lines. She retreats to a shadowed alcove, clutching a basket of folded linens to appear inconspicuous, and listens. Snatches of hushed conversation reach her ears. Caught at the tower. The king's orders. The English princess revealed it. Juliet's blood turns cold. Her worst fears materialize as she pieces the clues together. Isabella must have recognized the unique purses she gave, perhaps seeing one hanging from the belt of a certain knight. That innocent token, meant as a friendly gift, has betrayed a dangerous secret. Juliet hurries to her mistress's apartments, heart pounding harder with each step. She finds the princess there, pale as a sheet, standing rigidly in the center of the chamber while other ladies hover around her in distressed silence. On a nearby table lies the silk purse Isabella had given. That delicate gift, now a damning piece of evidence. The princess's trembling hands are empty. She has already been questioned and can only wait for her father-in-law's wrath to fall. When her eyes meet Juliet's, they brim with tears unshed, as if apologizing without words for dragging her loyal lady-in-waiting into this disaster. The king, Philip IV, wastes no time in exacting what he views as justice. In the days that follow, an oppressive gloom settles over the court. Juliet moves as if in a nightmare, attending to her duties in silence, while catastrophe unfolds around her. The two knights accused of loving the princesses are arrested and swiftly punished with merciless severity. Though Juliet is spared witnessing their fate, she hears from other servants that the men were tortured in the dank dungeons beneath the palace, their agonized cries echoing faintly through stone corridors at night. Ultimately, they meet a gruesome end on the executioner's scaffold, as the king makes an example of those who dishonored his family. The princesses, Juliet's beloved mistress among them, are not put to death, but their fates are cruel all the same. Stripped of their silks and jewels, the royal women are banished from court and confined in remote fortresses and convents, far from the glitter of Paris. Juliet's mistress is among those led away. The final glimpse Juliet has of her lady comes at dawn a week later, the princess being ushered into a covered carriage under guard, a heavy veil concealing her once radiant face. Forbidden from accompanying her, Juliet can only stand in the palace courtyard with clasped hands and bow her head in helpless farewell. The carriage rumbles out through the gates and is gone, carrying her mistress into isolation. Left behind, Juliet feels as though her own heart has been locked away in that distant cell, when once lively corridors of the palace fall into hushed disquiet. At twilight one evening, Juliet finds herself drawn back to the Tower of Nesle, that silent witness to so many secret nights. The tower stands cold and empty now. Its door has been barred by royal decree, and no footsteps echo within. Juliet stands at its base, where the waters of the Seine glide by, remembering the soft giggles and whispers the old stones once overheard. Gently, she presses her palm against the rough wall, as if searching for any remaining warmth of those past moments. In the hush of dusk, she almost imagines she can hear her mistress's laughter from behind the thick walls, a ghostly memory carried on the river breeze. Juliet closes her eyes and offers up a fervent prayer for her princess's well-being. She prays that somewhere in confinement, her mistress finds strength, forgiveness, or at least the mercy of dreamless sleep to escape her sorrow. The Seine's waters continue to lap gently at the tower's foundation, indifferent to human heartbreak. Overhead, clouds drift past the fading glow of sunset. Life in the royal court will move on, and official chronicles will record only terse lines about princesses disciplined for impropriety. Those records will never capture the human truth Juliet knows, the longing of a lonely young woman, and the steadfast loyalty of the friend who helped her taste a brief freedom. With a deep, shuddering breath, Juliet lets her tears fall silently in the dim light. In time, she will dry her eyes, square her shoulders, and carry on. A royal servant that has little choice but to continue serving, perhaps in a new household, far from the city. But for this moment by the abandoned tower, she permits herself to mourn. She grieves for the love that blossomed in secret and the swift, cruel hand that cut it down. She grieves for her kind-hearted princess, now exiled to lonely nights. The oil in Juliet's little lamp is nearly spent, its flame sputtering low. Taking a last look at the dark silhouette of the tower against the night sky, Juliet knows it is time to depart. She turns and walks away slowly, leaving the Tower of Nesle and its ghosts to the silence of the stars. As she steps back toward the palace, each footstep echoes softly on the cobblestones. In her heart, Juliet carries the memory of her mistress's trust and the sound of that precious laughter shared on secret midnights. Those memories belong to her alone now, a hidden letter folded away in her soul that no king's decree can destroy. Under the same night sky that once watched over forbidden trysts, Juliet slips quietly into the shadows of the royal residence. The scandal of the tower will, in time, fade into hushed legend, rarely spoken of in polite company. But the old stones by the river remember. In the stillness of future nights, perhaps the Tower of Nesle itself will recall the gentle love it once sheltered and the brave young guardian who stood watch, protecting her princess's heart until the very end. Renaissance Europe. A princess binds two kingdoms. High in a candle-lit chamber, adorned with tapestries of proud eagles and lions, a young princess sits by her window. It is the eve of her departure from her father's palace, sometime in the late Renaissance, and outside the mullioned glass the summer sky is deep blue with twilight. The princess, scarcely 18, gazes out at the familiar spires and rooftops of her city, knowing that by tomorrow she will be far away. In her lap rests a small painted portrait of a man she has never met, her future husband. She is a daughter of the mighty Habsburg dynasty, born into a world where marriages are currency and alliances are sealed not with ink alone, but with bridal veils. Tomorrow she will journey across mountains and rivers to a foreign court, there to wed a distant cousin who by contract and by careful negotiation has been chosen as her groom. With this union, two great kingdoms will be bound closer, and years of war may be averted, all resting on her slender shoulders and her hoped-for fertility. A soft knock sounds at the door. The princess's longtime nurse and confidant enters quietly, carrying folded gowns lined with lace, part of the trousseau being prepared for the journey. "My lady, forgive the intrusion," the older woman whispers, setting the garments into an open cedar chest, already filled with fine linens and jewels. The princess offers a small, tremulous smile. "Thank you, Marta. I was just thinking," she replies, fingers tracing the frame of the tiny portrait in her hands. The nurse steps closer and peers gently at the painting. It shows a young man in ornate armor, eyes stern yet handsome, a neat beard framing his mouth. "They say His Majesty is very dignified for his age," Marta offers kindly. The princess nods. She has heard many such careful assurances that her betrothed, the Archduke, is virtuous and pious, that he speaks several languages and is kind to his horses, that he was pleased when her dowry chests arrived safely by ship. It is all second-hand knowledge meant to soothe her anxieties about marrying a stranger. As night falls, the nurse helps the princess prepare for bed one last time in her maiden chambers. Golden light from two beeswax candles flickers over the carved bedposts and gilded icons on the wall. The princess's ladies have already departed to allow her some quiet hours of reflection. In the stillness, Marta brushes out the princess's long chestnut hair, the strokes slow and rhythmic. "You should sleep soon, child," the nurse murmurs, using the endearment from the princess's childhood. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Instead of answering, the young princess reaches into a velvet-lined box on her vanity and withdraws a delicate silver reliquary locket. Inside lies a sacred relic, a splinter of a saint's bone, believed to bless marriages with fruitfulness. Her mother pressed this into her palm earlier that day after a tearful farewell, urging her to wear it always, especially on her wedding night. Now the princess holds it to her heart. The metal is cool against her skin, and she closes her eyes, breathing a silent prayer that she will be able to do what is expected of her. A month ago, shortly after her betrothal was announced, the princess had been summoned to her father's study. She remembers standing before the king, a stern figure in brocade robes, as he explained her duty in blunt terms. "You must be a good wife to the Archduke," he had said, his voice echoing off the marble floor. "Show him obedience and provide him with sons. Our bloodline and our alliance depend on it." Beside him, a cardinal with kindly eyes nodded approvingly. The princess had flushed at the directness of the words, but she lowered her gaze and replied softly, "Yes, father, I understand." In truth, her heart had pounded with nervous fear. She understood the theory of what would be expected when she shared a bed with her new husband. Her ladies and a stern old dowager baroness had given her the requisite instruction, but the reality of it remained a great unknown. Now, on this final night in her childhood home, all those admonitions swirl in her mind. Her pale fingers fiddle with the edge of her embroidered nightrobe as she thinks of the Archduke in the portrait. Will he be gentle with her? Will he be pleased with her appearance, her manners, her dowry, her ability to secure an heir? She has heard whispers that a previous princess of a neighboring realm was sent back in disgrace for failing to conceive after several years. That specter looms over her thoughts. Failure is not an option. Too much depends on her. Marta finishes braiding the princess's hair loosely for sleep and tucks a few stray wisps behind her ear with affection. "My little one," the nurse says quietly, "I have watched you grow from a babe in arms to a fine lady. You have your mother's strength in you. By God's grace, all will be well." The princess turns and falls into the embrace of the woman who has been as a second mother to her. For a moment, she allows herself the luxury of tears. They slip out silently, dampening the shoulder of Marta's gray shawl. The older woman hums a lullaby under her breath, the same melody that once soothed the princess to sleep in the nursery. Gradually, the princess's trembling eases. She draws back and manages another smile, a bit steadier this time. "Stay with me until I fall asleep?" she asks softly. Marta nods and settles into a chair by the bedside. Climbing into the high bed, the princess feels the cool linen sheets against her legs. The familiar scent of lavender petals tucked into the bedding to perfume it reminds her of simpler times. Through the open window, a mild breeze drifts in, bringing the aroma of late-blooming roses from the palace gardens. The sounds of the city beyond have quieted as the hour grows late. She can faintly hear a night watchman calling out the hour and the clop of a horse's hooves on distant cobblestones. This is the last night these comforting sounds of home will surround her. In the dim light, the princess speaks into the hush, voicing the secret worry that has weighed on her for weeks. "Marta, what if I fail?" Her voice is barely above a whisper, a tremor in each word. The nurse reaches over and takes the princess's hand, work-worn fingers curling around the girl's slender ones. "Hush now. You have been raised for this. You will not fail. Give it time. The good Lord will bless you with a child when the time is right." Marta soothes. "Your new family will understand that these things are not always instant." She says it with more confidence than she truly feels. Both of them know many will be watching and waiting for the announcement of a pregnancy as soon as possible. But the gentle lie helps calm the princess a little. They sit in silence for a while, hand in hand. The princess's eyes roam once more to the portrait on her bedside table. In the flickering candlelight, the Archduke's painted eyes seem to almost meet hers. She wonders what he is doing at this very moment. Perhaps he is preparing for her arrival, instructing his household on how to greet their new Archduchess. Or perhaps, like her, he is staring at a portrait and wondering who she really is beyond the diplomatic promises and titles. Eventually, Marta begins to hum again, a slow, repetitive lullaby that sways like a gentle rocking boat. The princess's breathing grows deeper as the exhaustion of emotion and anticipation finally weighs down her eyelids. In her semi-dreaming state, images flutter through her mind. A grand cathedral decorated with candles and white lilies for her wedding, the murmur of Latin prayers, a ring of gold being placed on her finger by a man whose touch she does not yet know. She imagines standing on a palace balcony in a foreign land, an infant prince in her arms, presenting him to a cheering crowd below, the triumphant fulfillment of her duty. The vision is both comforting and daunting. As the candles gutter low, Marta gently eases her hand free from the sleeping princess's grasp. She drapes an extra quilt over the young woman, knowing how travel can fatigue even the strongest constitution. Before blowing out the last candle, the nurse casts one more glance at her charge's peaceful face. In sleep, the princess looks once again like the child Marta used to console after nightmares, innocence smoothing her brow. Marta whispers a prayer of her own for the girl's safety, happiness, and the blessing of healthy offspring that will secure her future. Tonight, at least, she is still just a daughter in her father's house, a young woman on the cusp of an unknown future. The palace around her slumbers as she does, unaware of the changes the dawn will bring. In this calm before the great journey, the princess sleeps, breathing softly, cradled by familiar darkness. She awakens before dawn to the muffled sounds of servants readying her caravan. The first light of day is a cool gray when she steps out of her chamber, Marta and a procession of ladies accompanying her. Down in the courtyard, a grand carriage emblazoned with the royal arms of both her father's house and her future husband's awaits. Its 6 white horses stamp impatiently in the morning chill. The king, her father, is not present. Tradition holds that farewells were said privately to spare public emotion, but her oldest brother and a retinue of dignitaries stand assembled to escort her to the border. As the princess walks toward the carriage, each footstep seems both heavy and unreal. Marta trails just behind, carrying a small casket of the princess's personal treasures. The young bride-to-be pauses at the threshold of the palace gate and turns for one last look at the only home she has ever known. The rose-colored dawn light softens the towering ramparts and glints off the high windows of the hall where she learned to dance, the chapel where she prayed daily for strength. She presses a kiss to her fingertips and subtly touches them to the cold stone wall in a gesture of silent goodbye. The journey ahead will be long, weeks over mountains and rivers, and with each mile she will shed a piece of her old identity to assume a new one as Archduchess, then Queen, in a foreign land. She takes a deep breath, straightens her spine, and steps into the carriage. Marta climbs in after her, and the door is gently shut. Within the gilded interior, the princess clasps Marta's hand tightly for a moment, drawing comfort from her nurse's steady presence. Outside, the chief steward raises a hand, and the carriage lurches into motion. As wheels crunch over the drawbridge, The princess feels a pang in her chest. She knows not when she might see these familiar turrets and courtyards again, perhaps never. Peering through the small glass window, she watches the silhouette of the palace recede. With it fade the echoes of her childhood laughter in the gardens, the memory of her mother's warm embrace, and even the grave advice of her father parting from her with a blessing the night before. A few loyal townsfolk have gathered just beyond the gates despite the early hour, holding flickering candles or lanterns to wish their princess well. The sight of their devoted, shadowed faces and the softly murmured prayers they offer moves her. She musters a smile and lifts her hand in a gentle wave. Some kneel as her carriage passes, tears in their eyes. In that moment, she understands that she carries not just her own hopes, but also the hopes of her people for peace and prosperity through this marriage. As the procession winds out of the castle grounds and onto the road that will take her toward an unknown future, the princess allows herself a few silent tears, tears that only Marta sees and gently wipes away with a corner of her shawl. The nurse whispers soothing words in their native Spanish, reminding her charge of the strength within her. The princess nods, drawing that strength around herself like a cloak. Soon, music from the accompanying riders, a gentle lute and flute, begins to play a traditional bridal farewell tune. The princess closes her eyes and lets the melody steady her heartbeat. With each turn of the carriage wheel, the rhythm of the road begins to lull her anxiety. She recalls the lullaby Marta hummed the night before and hums a few bars under her breath. It feels like a thread connecting the girl she was to the woman she must become. By the time the sun fully breaks over the horizon, painting the eastern sky in hues of gold, the outline of her childhood castle is far behind, obscured by rolling hills and morning mist. The Habsburg princess, now a voyager between worlds, sits with poise in her carriage, hands folded over her lap. Inside, her emotions swirl: sorrow, excitement, fear, determination. But outwardly, she maintains the serene expression expected of a royal bride. As the first day of her journey stretches ahead, she silently vows to honor both the family she leaves and the family she will gain. In her travel chest lies the silver reliquary with the saint's relic. She touches the spot on her gown beneath which it hangs and feels a small measure of reassurance. Whatever trials await, an unfamiliar court, the pressure to produce an heir, the scrutiny of a new family, she will meet them as that saint would, with quiet faith and courage. Thus the carriage moves on, wheels turning steadily, carrying the princess toward her destiny. Behind her, the palace fades into memory. Ahead, beyond the hills, a new life calls. And though she feels the weight of expectation, she is not alone. Generations of princesses before her have made this leap, and in her heart she carries the love of those she left behind. The soft rocking of the carriage eventually lulls her into a light doze, and in that sleep her dreams are gentle. She imagines a future child in her arms, a symbol of the alliance and affection this sacrifice of hers is meant to secure. For now, however, all is quiet, save for the creak of wood and the clop of hooves. Enveloped in the delicate dawn, the young princess rests, suspended between the life she knew and the life that awaits, a calm lull before the chorus of court life begins anew. Tudor England, the Queen's sorrowful vigil. A low fire burns in the hearth of Queen Catherine's bedchamber, its embers casting faint red light into the hushed room. It is a chilly autumn night in 1518 at Greenwich Palace. Dr. Thomas Linacre, the royal physician, sits quietly at a polished oak table not far from the Queen's bedside. Before him lies an untouched cup of spiced wine and an open journal where he has begun to record the events of this day, a day that was meant to bring celebration, but instead brought sorrow. Behind the drawn bed curtains, and Catherine of Aragon finally sleeps, exhausted by grief and physical ordeal. Only a few hours ago, she delivered a baby girl, stillborn and silent. The tiny infant had been swaddled and taken away by the midwives with gentle discretion. Now the room smells faintly of lavender water and bitter herbs used during the birth, a poignant mix with the smoke of the fire. Dr. Linacre runs a hand through his graying hair and closes his eyes in a moment of weary prayer. This was the Queen's last hope for a second child. Her earlier pregnancies in years past had ended in heartbreak, save for the one daughter, Princess Mary, who now sleeps in the nursery under a nurse's care. The physician's quill hovers over the journal page as he contemplates what to write. How does one capture a queen's despair in tidy Latin script? By protocol, he must report the outcome to the king in the morning, though surely King Henry already knows the tragic result by now. News like this travels fast through the private corridors of the palace. There will be no royal gun salutes at dawn, no bells ringing in celebration for a newborn prince. Instead, an uneasy quiet grips the palace tonight. Servants speak in whispers, and the guards in the passageway have downcast eyes. It is as if the whole court holds its breath, fearing the king's disappointment and the queen's anguish. Dr. Linacre dips his quill and begins to note the clinical details. 15th of November of 1518, Her Majesty delivered of a female child, stillborn, at 7 months' term. He pauses, the black ink pooling slightly on the page. The words feel dry and devoid of the human weight of the moment. With a soft sigh, he continues writing of the Queen's health, how she suffered a prolonged labor, how her bleeding was eventually staunched, and a calming draught administered. He omits any flourish of emotion. These records are for posterity and must remain formal. But in the margins, his hand trembles with the urge to express something more, his own aching empathy for the gentle Catherine, who had prayed so fervently for a healthy son. A faint rustle breaks the silence. The physician looks up to see one of the Queen's ladies emerging from behind the bed curtains. It is Lady Maria de Salinas, the Queen's dearest confidant. Her eyes are red from weeping, but she composes herself and walks over to Dr. Linacre. "She is asleep at last," Lady Maria whispers, glancing back to ensure they have not disturbed Catherine. The doctor nods and motions for her to sit in the adjacent chair. For a long moment, neither speaks. They both listen to the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional muffled sob of a junior maid in the antechamber beyond the door. The Queen, before she fell asleep, she asked for her rosary, Lady Maria says quietly. She prayed until her strength gave out. The lady-in-waiting's voice quavers slightly. Dr. Linacre folds his wrinkled hands atop the journal. "Prayer will give her comfort," he replies gently. "Catherine is known for her devout faith. In trial and in triumph, she always clings to her religious devotion." Already tonight, she had insisted that a mass be planned on the morrow for the soul of the lost child. The physician had acquiesced, knowing that such rituals were as vital to Catherine's healing as any medicine he could prescribe. Lady Maria dabs at her eyes with a kerchief. "I cannot help but wonder why God tests Her Majesty so," she says in a trembling whisper. "So many times now, so many little princes and princesses gone before they could even cry." Dr. Lineker feels the weight of her words. In the 8 years since Catherine first became pregnant, there had been multiple losses: a stillborn daughter, 2 infant sons who lived only brief days, and now this tiny stillborn girl. Only Princess Mary, now a bright 2-year-old, survives. He recalls each event keenly: the joy that turned to grief, the king's mounting frustration, the whispered blame that sometimes circulated in the corridors, though never in earshot of the queen. Some courtiers had begun to murmur superstitiously that the king's marriage was somehow cursed, citing the biblical warning that a man who marries his brother's widow will be childless. Dr. Lineker always dismissed such talk out of loyalty to Catherine, for he knew how deeply it would wound her if she heard. The queen had sworn that her first marriage to Prince Arthur was never consummated, and the Pope himself granted dispensation for her union with Henry. Yet on nights like this, when confronted with yet another lifeless infant, even the physician finds himself troubled by dark, irrational thoughts. He gently closes the leather-bound journal. "Her Majesty is strong of heart and spirit," he murmurs to Lady Maria, as much to reassure himself as to console her. "I have seen her recover from each tragedy with grace. In God's mercy, she may yet, perhaps." He trails off, unable to finish the thought that perhaps a miracle could still occur, that maybe, though the queen is in her 30s now, she might still give birth to a son in the future. The words sound hollow. They both know how slim those chances seem after so many failures. Outside, a gust of wind rattles the window panes. The doctor rises and gently adds a fresh log to the fire to keep the chill at bay. He moves slowly, feeling the stiffness in his joints. A man well past his youth, having served the royal family for decades. He remembers the night years ago when he helped deliver the newborn Prince Henry, the king and queen's son, who arrived on New Year's Day of 1511. How the bells pealed that night. London had been ablaze with bonfires of celebration. Young King Henry had been overjoyed, cradling the squalling babe and calling him his New Year's gift. Dr. Lineker also remembers, with a pang, how that joy turned to ashes when little Prince Henry sickened and died scarcely 7 weeks later. He can still picture Catherine's face at that funeral, pale and composed, a queenly mask over unfathomable sorrow. Lost in such memories, the physician realizes Lady Maria has been speaking. He turns to her. "Forgive me, my lady, I was wool-gathering." She manages a faint smile. "I only said that the king was with Her Majesty earlier," she repeats. "He stayed a while and held her hand, but left when she fell asleep. He seemed quiet. I think his grace was grieving too, in his own way." Dr. Lineker is mildly surprised. King Henry is not known for patience in the face of disappointment, especially as the years have passed without a male heir. But perhaps, the doctor muses, even Henry's frustration is tempered tonight by seeing his beloved wife's suffering. The king has always held affection for Catherine, respecting her wisdom and loyalty. It is part of what makes this situation so tragic. Two good, dutiful people thwarted by fate in the matter they desire most. The hour grows late. A mantel clock on the mantel ticks softly, approaching midnight. Lady Maria rises, smoothing her dark skirts. "I should retire and let Her Majesty rest," she whispers. "Will you remain here, Doctor?" Dr. Lineker inclines his head. "I will stay nearby, my lady. Should Her Majesty wake and require anything, I shall be at hand." With a last compassionate glance toward the bed where Catherine sleeps, Lady Maria departs, closing the chamber door behind her with a muted click. For a moment, the physician stands alone in the dim room, listening to the Queen's gentle breathing behind the curtains. He steps over to the bed and lifts the edge of the embroidered canopy. Catherine's face is relaxed in slumber, traces of dried tears at the corners of her closed eyes. Even in rest, her brow is faintly creased, as if her spirit cannot fully escape the sadness of waking life. "Doctor." Lineker adjusts the coverlet slightly to ensure the warmth, a small, fatherly gesture. In that instant, Catherine stirs. She does not wake, but her lips move as if speaking to someone in a dream. The doctor leans closer and hears her murmur softly in Spanish, her mother tongue a single word. "Hijo," son. A lump forms in the old man's throat. He withdraws and lets the curtain fall back into place. Returning to the table, he finds his eyes drawn to the journal again. Instead of sitting, he remains standing and writes a final line in a careful, deliberate hand. "May God grant us comfort and hope." It is not an official note, but a personal prayer. He leaves a space and then signs his name with a flourish, as if bearing witness to the unspoken emotions of this night. Setting the quill down, Dr. Lineker blows out all but one candle. The room sinks deeper into shadows, illuminated only by the hearth's glow. He settles into a cushioned chair near the fire to keep his vigil. Through the high windows, the physician can see a few stars peeking between clouds, their light cold and distant. He wonders if somewhere beyond those stars, Providence has already written the destiny of England, if a healthy sun will ever brighten these halls, or if Princess Mary might one day rule in her own right. Such thoughts are not his to decide. He can only tend to the bodies and hearts entrusted to his care. As the night deepens, Dr. Lineker remains awake, eyes occasionally closing, but ears alert for any stir from the Queen. In this fragile silence after tragedy, he offers his own silent plea that Catherine will find peace in time and that King Henry's heart will stay compassionate towards his loyal wife. The physician knows how history often forgets the intimate pains of the people who live it. Yet in this quiet chamber, on this sorrowful night, those pains are as palpable as the smoky warmth of the fire. And so he keeps watch, the lonely guardian of the king and queen's fragile hopes, until the first pale hint of dawn begins to lighten the sky above the Thames. Stuart, England, whispered favorites and secret lives. A pair of tapers burn low in an antechamber of Whitehall Palace, their light reflecting off paneled oak walls. It is the winter of 1623, and a young gentleman of the court finds himself in a peculiar position, keeping watch in a drafty corridor outside the king's private apartments at midnight. Inside, King James I is bidding an intimate good night to his closest favorite, George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham. The gentleman, a new groom of the bedchamber, stands stiffly, eyes averted, pretending not to hear the soft murmured conversation through the heavy door. Moments earlier, he had been summoned to carry a silver basin of spiced wine to His Majesty's drawing room. Entering quietly, he had witnessed a scene he will never forget. King James, hair disheveled from the long evening of revelry, sat close beside the handsome young duke on a cushioned settee. They were laughing softly over a jest no one else heard. The king's hand rested fondly on Buckingham's sleeve. As the servant presented the wine, James scarcely glanced his way, so engrossed was he in Buckingham's sparkling gaze. The groom withdrew as unnoticed as a shadow, but not before he caught a tender, unguarded moment. The king, in a fatherly yet unmistakably affectionate gesture, brushing an imagined speck of dust from Buckingham's cheek and whispering something that made the duke blush and smile. Now the groom waits in the corridor, cheeks warm with the knowledge of having seen something considered scandalous, yet strangely sweet. Courtiers whisper about the king's favorites, how James raised this Villiers from a minor gentleman to duke with unheard of speed, showering him with titles and gifts. They gossip in coded whispers that the king loves the duke beyond all others. Certainly, the king's long-standing habit of sharing his bedchamber with handsome young men has not gone unremarked, but no one would dare speak openly of it. In official accounts and polite correspondence, George Villiers is merely the royal favorite, a trusted advisor. History will record him as a powerful minister and the king's dear friend. The deeper truth of their bond, the affectionate letters in which James calls himself Buckingham's devoted husband, the stolen kisses and embraces witnessed by servants, those live only in hushed rumors and hidden notes, quickly burned. From within the chamber comes the low rumble of King James's voice. The words are indistinct, but the tone is gently teasing, almost paternal. Buckingham's lighter voice answers with a soft laugh. The groom lowers his eyes to the patterned carpet, feeling that he is intruding on a private exchange even at this distance. He has served in the palace only a short time, yet already he understands the unwritten rule. What the king shares with his favorites is not to be openly acknowledged. The king himself, devout in public, has denounced sin from the pulpit, even as he keeps young George ever at his side. It is a paradox the groom can scarcely comprehend, yet it seems to trouble James not at all. Heaven's blessing on your sweet face, the king suddenly exclaims warmly from behind the door, the words clear enough to reach the groom's ears. There is a muffled reply from Buckingham, then silence, followed by the sound of footsteps approaching. The antechamber door opens. Buckingham emerges first, his cheeks slightly flushed, dark eyes shining. He adjusts the lace collar of his doublet and inclines his head courteously to the groom as he passes. A moment later, King James appears in the doorway, robe draped loosely over his nightshirt. He places a fond hand on Buckingham's shoulder. "Good night, my sweet Steenie," James says softly, using his pet nickname for the Duke. "God bless ye." Buckingham bows over the king's hand, brushing it with his lips in a gesture half reverent, half playful. The intimacy of the moment makes the groom of the bedchamber glance respectfully away toward the tapestry-hung wall. When he looks back, The Duke of Buckingham is walking down the corridor, and King James watches after him with a tender, melancholy smile. The king notices the young groom and seems startled, as if he had forgotten someone else might be present. His face shifts back into a more guarded expression. "You may retire now," he says kindly but firmly, "and see that the lamps in the chapel gallery are trimmed at dawn." "Yes, your majesty," the groom bows. James gives one last look toward the darkness where Buckingham has vanished, then turns and withdraws into his apartments, the door closing behind him with a heavy thud. The groom departs, heart quietly pounding. In his pocket is a small folded paper. Earlier in the evening, one of the Duke's gentlemen pressed it into his hand with a meaningful look. It is a copy of a poem, said to be written by King James for Buckingham. Though tempted by curiosity, the groom will never dare show it to another soul. By morning, he will toss the paper into the hearth's flames, letting those fervent lines turn to ash. He knows that to serve the Stuart court is to keep its confessions and contradictions in confidence. And so, through drafty halls, he carries the secret of the king, and his favorite like one carries a fragile glass, careful at every step. 4 decades later, another king's footsteps echo through the moonlit galleries of Whitehall, this time a far different monarch and a far different love. It is the spring of 1668, and King Charles II strides with a relaxed, languid gait toward the chambers of his principal mistress, Nell Gwyn. The palace is quieter at this late hour, but not entirely asleep. Distant strains of music and laughter from a fading banquet still linger. Charles, the merry monarch, is returning from an evening's entertainment and has decided to end the night in the comfort of Nell's company rather than in the Queen's apartments. In a richly furnished room decorated with velvet draperies and fragrant bowls of orange blossoms, Eleanor Nell Gwyn sits brushing out her coppery hair by candlelight. Once an actress on the London stage, she is now the most beloved of the king's many mistresses, and notably one of the few who can make him laugh in any mood. Hearing the approach of boots on the parquet floor outside, Nell sets aside her brush and smiles to herself. She knows that unhurried stride. A moment later, Charles eases open the door without ceremony. He finds Nell turned toward him, her youthful face brightening. She offers a mock curtsy from her seat. "Good even, your majesty," she teases lightly, her eyes dancing. "Have you come to put poor Nellie to bed?" Charles chuckles and closes the door behind him. "If she'll have me," he replies in a low, warm tone, crossing the room. Before he can say more, Nell rises and crosses to him, placing a finger to her lips in playful reproach. "Shh, shh," she whispers. "We mustn't wake the little one." In a cradle near the bed, the infant son Nell bore the king last year lies sleeping soundly. Charles smiles at the sight of the child, another healthy boy, albeit illegitimate, added to the brood of children he has sired outside his marriage. He has already granted this one a noble title, as he has done for his other acknowledged bastards. In truth, nearly everyone at court knows the king's bedding arrangements. Far from hiding his mistresses, Charles parades them openly. Nell herself, witty and unpretentious, is adored by the public. They call her our Protestant mistress, in good humor, a jabe at the king's other favorite mistress, the Catholic Louise de Querouaille. Charles settles into a cushioned chair, and Nell perches on its arm, their familiarity evident in every gesture. She pours him a goblet of sweet wine from a decanter on the side table, and he thanks her with a gentle pat on her hand. It is a scene of domestic ease that one would never see in official portraits or state records. The king in shirt sleeves, leaning into the touch of a common-born woman who has captured his heart this evening. "How was the mask, sire?" Nell asks in a soft voice. Charles rolls his eyes comically. "Too long and tragically dull until the very end, when a stray dog ran across the stage and much improved the performance," he quips. Nell stifles a laugh to keep from waking the baby. She loves these moments, when Charles sheds the weight of kingship and becomes simply a witty man murmuring endearments to her. With the baby still sleeping soundly, Nell settles onto the king's lap as he wraps a lazy arm around her waist. He tells her a scandalous joke he heard in the theater, knowing her sharp mind wills appreciate it, and she giggles, resting her head on his shoulder. Outside their private bubble, the vast palace is dark, save for a few candles in the Queen's apartments on the floor below. Queen Catherine of Braganza, Charles's Portuguese wife, is likely awake too, not in revelry, but in prayer. It's said the Queen spends many late nights on her knees in the chapel, a rosary in her hands, beseeching God for the miracle of a child. She has endured the public humiliation of barrenness, while her husband's mistresses bear him illegitimate sons and daughters. Yet Catherine remains gracious, never voicing reproach. Charles admires her goodness, but cannot emulate her piety. He lives as he pleases, even joking once that she is a saint for tolerating a sinner like him. Upstairs, Nell strokes the king's graying hair and whispers, "You should rest, your majesty. It's past the hour of the owl." Charles sighs contentedly. "Here with you, my pretty Nell, rest comes easy," he replies. In this gentle, unguarded state, his speech lapses into the informal Cockney lilt he grew up around, a manner he suppresses in court to sound kingly. Nell notices and smiles. To her, this is proof that he feels utterly at ease with her. Before the embers in the fireplace die out, Charles stands and, with a gallant sweep, scoops Nell into his arms. She muffles a squeal of laughter against his chest to avoid waking the baby. The king carries her toward the adjoining bedchamber. As they disappear behind a heavy brocade curtain, he extinguishes the last candle. In the corridor beyond Nell's door, two liveried guards stand watch, trading knowing glances. The scenario is familiar and a drama-free. The court long ago accepted that the king divides his nights as he sees fit. Within these palace walls, it is no secret that virtue is often a public performance, while private desires chart their own course. The official chronicles of Charles II's reign will dutifully mention Queen Catherine's devotions and the king's efforts in parliament and war. They will not mention Nell Gwyn's laughter or the tender way the king fell asleep that night with an unwed actress nestled in his arms. By dawn, Charles will return to the Queen's chambers to formally start the day, and Nell will play with their infant son in the morning light, content with the quiet understanding she and her sovereign share. Catherine, the Queen, will greet her husband with a mild smile, concealing her heartbreak behind dark, hopeful eyes. And life at the Stuart court will continue, a theater of appearances, sustained by the tacit agreement to leave certain truths unspoken. Yet in the hush before sunrise, when only the Thames's murmur can be heard beyond the palace, the line between wife and mistress, duty and inclination, blurs into irrelevance. In those moments, Charles is neither the merry monarch nor the public sinner. He is simply a man chasing affection and comfort where he can find it, and women like Nell and Catherine, each in their own way, give it to him at great personal cost. The palace rooster crows, faint through the stone walls. In Nell's chambers, the king stirs and presses a light kiss to her forehead before slipping out to resume his royal persona. Down the hall, Queen Catherine rises from her prie-dieu, crossing herself and preparing to face another day of dignified endurance. The carefree whispers of the night give way to the careful formalities of day. But these private midnight interludes, James's secret tenderness with his duke, Charles's warm nights with his mistress, live on in the memories of those who witnessed or shared them. They are the hidden verses of the Ballad of Monarchy, softer in tone, but no less true than the loud chorus of public events. As our gaze leaves the Stuart courts, we do so with a gentle understanding. Even in an age of strict religious morals and regal pomp, love and longing found quiet corners to flourish, shielded by loyal hearts and the forgiving cloak of night. Versailles in the Sun King's court, behind gilded curtains. The Palace of Versailles lies in a hush past midnight, its endless corridors lit by the soft glow of oil lamps. In the Queen's antechamber, two ladies-in-waiting sit beneath a frescoed ceiling, speaking in low, measured tones. It is 1676, and outside the tall windows, the summer night is perfumed with the scent of roses from the orangery. Young Elizabeth, recently appointed to serve Queen Maria Theresa, listens intently as the older lady beside her, Madame de Clairfont, dispenses advice on the delicate balance of courtly life. Earlier that evening, Elizabeth witnessed her first royal cowsher, the elaborate ceremony of the king's retiring to bed. She had stood among dozens of nobles packed into the gleaming bedchamber of Louis XIV. By tradition, the queen was present, dutifully bidding the king good night with a kiss on the hand. But what fascinated Elizabeth more was the presence of another woman on the opposite side of the magnificent bed, Madame de Montespan, the king's maîtresse en titre, shimmering in a gown of blue satin and diamonds. Though unofficial in rank, Madame de Montespan carried herself with the confidence of a crowned head. When the king smiled at Montespan, the courtiers watched her as one might the moon eclipsing the sun, a bright, reflective glory they dared not look at directly, yet could not ignore. Now, in the stillness of the queen's private apartments, Elizabeth musters the courage to voice the question that has been on her mind all night. Madame, she whispers to her mentor, is it always so that the king's lady shares those moments meant for the queen? Her tone is hesitant, for one does not criticize the king at Versailles. Madame de Clairfont gently folds a piece of lace embroidery in her lap and gives a faint, knowing smile. My dear, here one learns to see with his eyes half open, she replies cryptically. The Sun King shines on many gardens. We, as his humble flowers, turn wherever his warmth is directed. Elizabeth flushes at the poetic evasion. Sensing the younger woman's unease, Madame de Clairfont pats her hand. In plainer words, child, yes, the king's favorite will often attend rituals, even the queen does, though unofficially. It has been this way for some years now. The Queen, God bless her pure soul, bears it with grace and silence. She lowers her voice further. It is not our place to question. We curtsy to whomever His Majesty shows favor. Elizabeth recalls how, during the Grand Supper earlier, nearly every gaze in the Hall of Mirrors slid toward Montespan's end of the table, where Louis XIV lavished attention on her, passing her a sugared strawberry from his own plate, whispering a witticism that made her laugh behind her fan. The Queen sat composed at the King's other side, speaking quietly with her confessor and pretending not to notice. The etiquette of it all was bewildering to Elizabeth. Officially, the Queen held the highest rank among women at court. Yet it was Montespan who wore the more splendid jewels tonight. Montespan, whose clever remarks drew laughter from the king and princes. I felt such pity for Her Majesty, Elizabeth admits, her voice barely audible over the soft tick of a pendulum clock in the corner. Madame de Clairefont's expression grows guarded, and she casts a quick glance at the door to ensure no one eavesdrops. Satisfied they are alone, she sighs. Her Majesty has her ladies and her faith to console her. She finds joy in her children. Do not fret overmuch. A queen is raised to endure these trials. The older lady's eyes drift toward an ivory crucifix on the wall, as if seeking guidance. Besides, the Queen knows that in the official chronicles, she alone will be exalted as the king's companion. Mistresses are creatures of rumor and songs, not history books. Elizabeth nods slowly. She has heard the palace historians praising Louis XIV's devout marriage and fertile union with Maria Theresa, while omitting any mention of the string of maîtresses who occupy his affections. Perhaps Madame de Clairfont is right. Silence in the moment and history's selective memory later are the only salves afforded to a slighted wife. Still, the young lady in waiting cannot shake the image of the Queen's eyes during the cowsher ceremony, downcast and shining with unshed tears that only someone standing as close as Elizabeth could notice. All at once, a faint cry pierces the quiet, the wail of an infant from an adjacent room. Both women rise, smoothing their skirts. It is the Dauphin's nursery. Not long ago, the Queen gave birth to a new son, adding a second living child to her brood after years of losses. Elizabeth moves toward the connecting door, but Madame de Clairfont gently stays her arm. Go, I will attend Her Majesty's prince, the elder whispers kindly. The wet nurse will need guidance. Elizabeth curtsies and steps back, watching as Madame de Clairfont slips into the dimly lit nursery. Alone now in the antechamber, Elizabeth walks toward the open window to gather her thoughts. A mild breeze carries the distant strains of a violin, perhaps a late-night serenade for some court lovers strolling the gardens. She gazes out at the grand perspective, the geometrically arrayed flower beds and fountains glinting under moon and torchlight. Versailles by night is peaceful, its relentless pageantry at rest until the sun returns to prompt the next ballet of duties and desires. On the flagstone terrace just below, Elizabeth notices two figures walking slowly. Even in shadows, she recognizes the tall, regal stance of the king, and beside him, the graceful silhouette of Madame de Montespan. Louis had retired officially, but it seems he has found a second wind. They stroll arm in arm, their voices too low to carry, but their body language speaking volumes of ease and familiarity. At one point, Montespan laughs, and the king stops to gently adjust the shawl around her shoulders, a tender gesture that in another life might have been reserved for his wife. Elizabeth steps back instinctively, as though having seen something not meant for her eyes. Her heart aches subtly for the sleeping queen beyond the wall, yet she also feels a begrudging understanding. The king's love follows its own laws. To the courtiers, he is Apollo, the sun, around which all must orbit. Even the queen, by marriage the moon to his sun, cannot pull his course. There is a saying whispered among the maids: "The king does as pleases him, and God grants him that freedom." In these words lies acceptance, if not approval. A gentle hand on Elizabeth's shoulder startles her from her reverie. It is Madame de Clairfont, returned from settling the infant dauphin. "Your eyes are keen, mademoiselle," the older woman says softly, following Elizabeth's gaze out the window to the retreating figures of Louis and Montespan. The king and his mistress are now disappearing into a hedge-lined path lit by lanterns. Best to leave them to the night. We have our duty to attend to our mistress, the queen. Elizabeth straightens her back and musters a determined smile. "Of course," she replies. Together they close the window, shutting out the sight of the gardens. Versailles' thick glass panes once again reflect only the two ladies and the tidy lamplit room that is their world. Madame de Clairfont leads Elizabeth toward the queen's bedroom door, where within Maria Theresa prays on her kneeler before sleep, likely unaware of, or deliberately ignoring, her husband's late stroll. Before they enter, the older lady squeezes Elizabeth's hand briefly. "Remember, child," she whispers, "we serve Her Majesty with all loyalty and affection. In these gilded halls, that is both our burden and our honor." Elizabeth nods, imprinting the words on her heart. She resolves that whatever she witnesses in this palace of glittering illusions, she will comfort and support the gentle queen as best she can. As they step quietly back into the queen's chamber, the heavy door closes behind them with a soft click. The outside world, with its wandering kings and laughing mistresses, is firmly shut out. Inside, there is only the dim light of the altar candles and the rustle of the queen's silk nightgown as she rises from her prayers. Elizabeth moves silently to take up the queen's handkerchief and candle, ready to accompany Maria Theresa to bed. In the silent exchange of a tired smile from the queen, Elizabeth finds purpose. Versailles continues its stately dance of duty and desire, public virtue, and private longing. And here, behind gilded curtains, those who serve witness everything and say nothing. They will leave behind no diaries or proclamations of what their eyes have seen. But in the quiet of nights like this, the truth lives in their hearts, in a shared glance, in an unspoken understanding among those who faithfully attend a queen who carries on, dignified and devout, under the weight of a king's divided love. Ottoman Empire, night in the imperial harem. In the heart of Topkapi Palace, behind a lattice of carved cedar and ivory, the Sultan's harem lies quiet under the stars. Tonight, a young concubine named Layla kneels by a marble fountain in the dimly lamplit baths, her dark hair still damp and scented with jasmine oil. She has been bathed, perfumed, and dressed in a gauzy robe of deep carmine red, the color of pomegranates and quiet ambition. Around her, a few other women lounge drowsily on silk cushions, or murmur prayers. But Layla's mind is elsewhere. Tonight might be the night she is summoned to the Sultan's chamber. A tall eunuch guardian, named Abbas, steps soundlessly into the baths. The women immediately fall silent, each set of eyes glimmering with a mix of hope and apprehension. In his slender hands, Abbas holds a small scroll, the Sultan's order indicating whom he desires to attend him this night. Layla's heart quickens. She lowers her gaze to the mosaic floor as protocol demands, but she cannot help the tremor in her fingers. This secluded world of the harem has its own rhythm and rules, and one of them is this. When the Sultan beckons, one must go with grace and without hesitation. Abbas clears his throat softly and unrolls the parchment. Layla, he announces, in an even tone that betrays nothing. Layla feels a jolt in her chest. For an instant, she wonders if she imagined it, but the other concubines are now looking at her with a flicker of envy or relief, depending on their own secret wishes. Swallowing hard, Layla presses her forehead briefly to the cool stone floor in a gesture of obedience and gratitude. By the time she rises, 2 elderly attendants have appeared at her side, ready to escort her through the labyrinth of corridors that lead from the harem to the Sultan's private apartments. The walk feels dreamlike. Barefoot on polished marble, Layla moves through archways and past guards who stand like statues. Only the faint jingling of the beaded belt at her waist marks her passage. One of the attendants carries a brass lamp that casts dancing shadows on the tiled walls. As they ascend a narrow staircase, Layla silently recites a prayer she learned as a child, asking for courage and favor. She thinks of the life that brought her here. The daughter of a Circassian farmer, she was taken in a yearly tribute and trained in palace arts, music, poetry, the art of conversation, and subtle dance. She has not seen her family in years. Here in the Sultan's sublime threshold, the past feels as distant as the constellations twinkling beyond the palace domes. At a gilded door, Abbas and another black-clad eunuch await. One attendant gently adjusts Layla's robe, ensuring it drapes just so off her shoulder, a deliberate hint of softness. The other murmurs, "Be calm, child. Bow low. Speak only when addressed." Layla nods almost imperceptibly. Her mouth is dry despite the fragrant sherbet she drank earlier to sweeten her breath. Beyond these doors lies the Sultan, a man said to be the shadow of God on earth, master of an empire, yet in private moments, simply a man with his own yearnings and burdens. At Abbas's signal, the doors open. Layla steps through a heavy curtain of embroidered silk into the Sultan's bedchamber. The air inside is warm and hazy with incense, a blend of sandalwood and amber. Lamps with delicate filigree shades cast an amber glow. Against one wall, water trickles softly in an indoor fountain, soothing as a lullaby. The Sultan reclines on a low divan strewn with pillows. He is partially in shadow, but Layla dares a brief glance as she makes her obeisance, touching her forehead to the carpet. Sultan Mehmed, for that is the Padishah's name tonight, is in early middle age, with a neatly trimmed beard and observant dark eyes that catch the lamplight. He wears a loose robe of silk and an expression of measured curiosity as he watches Layla. "Come closer," the Sultan says gently, in a voice deeper and kinder than she expected. Layla rises to her knees and moves closer on the carpet until she is at his feet. An attendant eunuch closes the door behind her, withdrawing to a discreet distance, still present in case of need, but out of immediate sight. In this private sanctum, it is mostly quiet, the sounds of the palace muffled by thick walls and drapes. Layla's own heartbeat sounds loud in her ears. The Sultan reaches out and lifts her chin with 2 fingers, a gesture at once intimate and assessing. Layla keeps her eyes respectfully lowered, as taught, though she senses his gaze traveling over her delicate features and the curve of her shoulders beneath the sheer robe. "You are new to my chambers," he says softly. "What is your name?" "Layla, my lord," she replies, voice steady despite the butterflies swirling within her. "Layla," he repeats, as if tasting the syllables. "Night Beauty, a fitting name." A hint of a smile touches his lips, and he motions for her to sit beside him on the divan. As she obeys, the Sultan offers a cup of sherbet from a tray on a low table. Layla takes a sip. It is cool, sweet with pomegranate and rose, easing the dryness in her throat. The Sultan asks her a few gentle questions. How are her lessons progressing? Does she enjoy music? Is she comfortable in the palace? Layla answers quietly, each response carefully respectful, yet honest enough to show a glimmer of personality, just as the harem tutors instructed. He seems pleased by her composure. Gradually, the conversation lapses, and a comfortable silence falls, broken only by the tinkling fountain. Outside the latticed windows, the Bosphorus reflects a crescent moon. Layla notices the Sultan's eyes drift momentarily to that silver sliver in the sky. She wonders what burdens rest on his mind. The counsel he must give at dawn, the treaties, the constant dance of power. In this fleeting night, she is meant to be his solace, a soft haven from the storm of empire. The Sultan reaches and gently twines a lock of Layla's hair around his finger, the action almost absent-minded. In that tender gesture, Layla senses a kind of loneliness. She realizes that even surrounded by hundreds of loyal servants and guarded by armies, a sultan can feel alone in the quiet of the night. It emboldens her just a little. She recites a short couplet of poetry in Persian, something she learned about the nightingale finding refuge in the rose's embrace. Her voice is barely above a whisper. The Sultan's eyes meet hers, surprise and warmth flickering there. He recognizes the verse and completes the next line softly from memory. A subtle understanding passes between them, like a small bridge built in the stillness. In the morning, this encounter will enter the careful records of the harem administration. Layla's name will be noted as having attended the Sultan. If in time she conceives a child, a son perhaps, her status will be elevated to that of an honored mother, with her own apartments and influence. If not, she will continue her days among the ranks of beauties, embroidering, singing, waiting for fortune's wheel to spin again. But in this moment, such calculations feel distant. Within the scented hush of the Sultan's chamber, she is simply a young woman sharing a quiet connection with a man who, for all his power, seeks comfort and companionship like any other. A clock in the outer hall chimes softly to mark the hour. Midnight has passed. The world beyond this room sleeps, unaware of the small human stories unfolding within the palace walls. Layla feels the Sultan's hand rest over hers. The warmth of that simple contact calms the last of her fears. She recalls another rule taught to her in the harem, that above all, the Sultan values tranquility in his consort's presence. So she lets the calm of the night envelop them, saying nothing more, just offering a gentle smile as the Sultan draws her nearer. Somewhere in the labyrinth of the harem, other women dream, some perhaps of the very honor Layla is now experiencing. And elsewhere in the palace, the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, likely whispers a prayer that a new prince might soon grace the dynasty. Such is the constant undercurrent in this world, hopes and ambitions flowing silently beneath a serene surface. But here and now, these currents do not disturb the gentle eddy of the moment. As the candlelight wavers, throwing gold patterns on the domed ceiling, Layla understands in her heart the balance required of her. She must be at once soothing and intriguing, humble yet memorable. It is a delicate performance, much like the music of the qanun she has learned to play, taut strings that must be plucked with just the right pressure to produce harmony. The night deepens. In the shadows, Abbas and the other eunuchs keep their vigilant watch just outside the chamber, ensuring the Sultan's privacy and safety. Within, time seems to slow. Layla will not remember the details of every word exchanged or each gesture. What will stay with her is the sense of surreal calm, the perfume of incense mixing with the Sultan's own scent of rosewater and spice, the gentle timbre of his voice in the darkness, and the understanding that she has passed a threshold in her life. By the time a hint of dawn's pale light begins to soften the eastern sky, Layla will be escorted back to the harem on quiet feet. Other concubines will cluster around her for hints of how the night went, and she will only smile demurely and say, "His Majesty was kind." She will perform the ritual washing and offer thanks in the small mosque within the harem, and she will sleep, perhaps dreaming of nightingales and roses. For now, though, night reigns. The Sultan, contented for the moment, reclines with eyes half closed as Layla recites a few more lines of verse she knows. The words float like butterflies in the still air. In this tranquil bubble of time, enclosed by silken walls and starry night, an emperor and a concubine share a gentle solitude. It is one of countless intimate scenes that history's grand narrative will never note. But within the silence of the harem, it is everything. The fulfillment of a young woman's anxious hopes, the easing of a ruler's daily cares, a quiet human connection forged in the secret hours of the Ottoman night. Imperial China, secrets of the Forbidden City. Knight's Ming Dynasty, 1600s. The bronze water clock in the hall strikes the second watch of the night. As imperial historian, Xu Wen sits alone by the light of a flickering lantern. Outside, rain patters softly on the tiled roofs of the Forbidden City. Xu Wen's desk is spread with bamboo scrolls and ink brushes, but his hand hesitates above the page. Through a nearby lattice window, he can see the faint glow emanating from the private quarters of the Wanli Emperor. Despite the late hour, the Emperor is still awake, not poring over memorials from ministers, as he should be, but in the company of his beloved concubine Zheng. Xu Wen closes his eyes and recalls the heated debate in court earlier that week. The officials had pleaded with the emperor to name his eldest son, born to the empress, as the crown prince. Yet the emperor stubbornly delayed, favoring concubine Zheng's younger son out of affection for her. This conflict has dragged on for years, paralyzing the court. The historian's official duty is to record the truth of affairs for posterity, but tonight, as on many nights, the truth is awkward and sensitive. How to note that the Son of Heaven neglects his morning audiences, preferring to spend his days and nights in languid retreat with his favorite. How to phrase delicately that the empire's business piles up unattended, while an emperor's private desires hold sway. A gust of wind causes the lantern flame to dance, throwing shifting shadows on the vermilion walls. In those shadows, Shu Wen imagines he sees the shapes of history itself, twisting to avoid the unflattering parts. With a resigned sigh, he dips his brush in ink and begins to write in careful classical prose. The emperor, in his wisdom, chose to take repose and did not hold audience this day. It is a genteel lie by omission. He will not mention the petitions gathering dust, nor the soft laughter and wine that spilled late into the afternoon from behind the concubines' silk screens. Those intimate details will live only in palace gossip and the frustrated hearts of ministers. From across the compound, a faint trill of feminine laughter echoes then quiets abruptly. Shu Wen sets down his brush. He knows that within the emperor's chambers, Lady Jing likely reads poetry to Wanli or plays the qin softly to soothe his spirits. The emperor is a man exhausted by politics, finding refuge in the warmth of his beloved's company. The historian in Shu Wen can empathize on a human level, even as he laments the consequences for the realm. Lightning flashes, briefly illuminating the courtyard, a silver tableau of rain and ancient cypresses. Shu Wen lifts the nearly dry historical record he has written and sand sprinkles it to set the ink. By dawn, this sanitized account will enter the annals. In the quiet that follows the thunder, Shu Wen whispers a confession to the empty hall. May future generations understand what I cannot write. He bows toward the emperor's quarters, a gesture of loyalty tinged with sorrow, and then blows out his lantern. The Ming dynasty will continue its march, outwardly orderly, inwardly strained, and tonight's truths will dissolve into the secret folds of the palace night. Qing Dynasty, 1770s. A century and more has passed. The Ming are gone. The Qing Dynasty now rules from the same forbidden city. By candlelight in a different chamber, senior eunuch Li Yun carefully inscribes a date and a name onto a silk-bound register. It is late in the reign of Emperor Qianlong, and the custom of meticulously recording the emperor's nightly companion is well established. Li Yun dips his fine brush and writes the hour of the pig around 10 p.m., followed by the chosen consort's title. Noble consort Ling attended his majesty this night. The script is small and neat. This confidential ledger will be stored in locked archives, a pragmatic tool for palace administrators to track which consorts might soon bear fruit of the dragon seed. Li Yun sets aside his brush and steps out into a lantern-lit colonnade. The night air is cool and still. Not far off, an unseen cricket sings its solitary song among the groomed peony bushes. Moments ago, he escorted noble consort Ling from the emperor's bedroom after her allotted time had passed. Two maidservants had swiftly wrapped the drowsy consort in a warm robe and guided her back toward her own quarters in the deep hush as decorum dictates. Emperor Qianlong himself now likely sleeps, or perhaps reads one of his beloved calligraphy scrolls by the amber glow of his bedside lamp. As Li Yun walks silently toward his small office adjoining the palace of tranquil longevity, he reflects on how structured life in the harem has become. Every evening a ritual unfolds. After dinner, The chief eunuch presents the emperor with a tray of small ivory plaques, each carved with the name of an available consort. The emperor flips one plaque to select who will share his company that night. It is a system devised to ensure fairness and avoid jealousy. A far cry. Li Yun muses from the tales he heard of earlier dynasties where favorites could keep the emperor from visiting others for months or years. In Qianlong's court, even affection is scheduled. Li Yun enters his tidy office, where a single candle burns beside the official register. On the wall hangs a watercolor painting of lotus blossoms and carp, symbols of harmony and abundance. The eunuch remembers his own youth in the palace when he was assigned to the apartments of the empress. Back then, as a nervous boy, he marveled at the grace of Empress Fuxia and the quiet sorrow that passed over the court when she died young. Decades later, he has witnessed many such personal dramas. Jealous quarrels among lower-ranking concubines, swiftly hushed, an imperial infant's first cry echoing down marble halls at dawn, a disfavored consort weeping alone under a plum tree in winter. None of these human moments will ever be known to the outside world. Officially, the court is a place of perfect Confucian order. The emperor benevolent, the empress virtuous, the consorts dignified and content in their gilded confinement. Picking up the register once more, Li Yun reviews entries from prior nights. He sees a rotation of names: Consort Shu one night, Consort Yi the next, the noble Consort Ling tonight. Likely tomorrow, the emperor will visit the empress as a matter of routine respect. The eunuch nods to himself, satisfied that all appears balanced. Part of him wonders, though, at the cost of such balance. He has caught fleeting glimpses of disappointment on some of the ladies' faces when the ivory plaque passed them by yet again. There are women in this palace, now past their youth, who have never once been summoned by the emperor. They will spend their lives in embroidery and prayer, pearls on a shelf, never to know the intimacy of the man they technically wed by entering his harem. Li Yun sighs and closes the ledger, securing it with a silk cord. His duties for the night are nearly done. Before retiring, he must make a quiet round of the outer halls, ensuring all lamps are trimmed and that the night sentries are wakeful. As he steps back outside, he tilts his head up to observe the moon, now a pale disk peeking through thin clouds. The same moon, he reflects, that once shone on the Ming historian Xu Wen, whose secret marginal notes Li Yun once stumbled upon in the archives, cryptic and sorrowful. The same moon that lights the hidden corners of every palace, dynasty after dynasty. In a distant courtyard of the Forbidden City, a lone bell chimes the third watch. Li Yun walks along a covered walkway, his slippered feet making no sound. Through the carved screen windows of the consort's wing, he sees dim lights. Some ladies stay up reading poetry or painting to lull themselves to sleep on nights the emperor does not call on them. He wonders what dreams fill the heads of these women. Some might dream of love, others of power, others perhaps simply of freedom beyond the vermilion walls. Finally, Li Yun arrives at the entrance to the emperor's sleeping quarters to take one last check. All is serene. Two eunuch guards nod to him in silent acknowledgement. Inside, presumably, the emperor rests peacefully, secure in the knowledge that all is well ordered in his realm tonight. The eunuch offers a bow toward the door, a gesture of respect to his sovereign, and also a silent prayer for the emperor's continued vitality. For in the emperor's well-being lies the fate of all who live within these walls. As he turns to depart, Lai Yun cannot help but feel a gentle wave of sympathy for his master. The Emperor of China carries infinite responsibilities by day, becoming almost a sacred symbol. Yet at night he is but a man seeking companionship to lighten his heart. Whether in the unruly days of the late Ming or the regimented nights of the Qing, that simple truth remains. It is a thread connecting all those silent stories across time. Stories of desire, duty, longing, and comfort that play out behind silk curtains while the rest of the world sleeps. Within the high red walls of the Forbidden City, secrets accumulate like fallen petals in a hidden garden. Come morning, the halls will bustle again with ceremonial precision. Edicts will be issued, chronicles written, faces presented in perfect composure. But as the imperial attendant Li Yun retreats to his quarters, he carries with him the unrecorded memory of this night's quiet humanity. A dutiful consort walking back to her chambers under the moon's gaze, an emperor finding a brief respite from the weight of empire in her gentle presence, and the silent watcher himself bearing witness to it all with compassion and diligence. In the grand tapestry of China's history, these nights will not be remembered, yet they are, in their own way, the living heart of the palace, the soft pulse of life behind the veil of majesty. Conclusion. In the end, as our journey drifts to a close, we return to the quiet present. The grand palaces and forbidden chambers fade into soft darkness, leaving only lessons and whispers. Through these gentle tales, from Tudor England to Qing China, a common truth shimmers. Behind every facade of power and pageantry were human hearts, yearning, suffering, loving in secret. Kings and queens, concubines and courtiers, all wove the fabric of history with threads both bold and delicate. Official chronicles rarely recorded these private moments. The scrolls and scriptures of each era instead celebrated victories, listed lineage, praised virtue. Yet we have wandered in the hushed margins, where the quills of court historians fell silent. There, in candlelit alcoves and moonlit gardens, we have witnessed a tapestry of hidden emotions. A princess's lonely prayer, a physician's compassionate vigil, a mistress's bittersweet triumph, a concubine's hopeful night, a favorite's tender exchange, and a scholar's guarded pen. The air of our modern room is still and calm now, as if respecting the gravity and grace of all that came before. Imagine those long-ago figures, finally at rest, the lady-in-waiting Juliet walking away from the Tower of Nesle, the young Habsburg princess sleeping before her destiny, Queen Catherine finding solace in faith, Duke Buckingham slipping into shadows with the king's blessing, the Versailles courtier closing the window on the king's affair, the concubine Layla basking in a rare moment of warmth, and the dedicated attendants of China's emperors dutifully recording or concealing truths. Each, in their own way, carried a burden of secrecy so that the larger narrative, the one the world was meant to see, could remain unmarred. Officially, perhaps, nothing of note happened on these nights. But we know better now. We have heard the subtext of history humming softly beneath the official record, the lullabies, the prayers, the murmured endearments, and stifled sobs. and in hearing them, we have given those silenced experiences a gentle acknowledgement. Our eyes grow heavy, and the scenes of the past begin to meld with the stillness of our own room. The purpose of sharing these stories has not been to judge the past, but to humanize it, to offer a compassionate nod to those sidelined truths. There is a profound peace in understanding that history is not only dates and battles, but also the soft footfall of a nursemaid tiptoeing out of a royal nursery, the rustle of a love letter being burned before dawn, the suppressed sigh of a queen watching her king from afar. Allow these images to soften and dissipate like mist at morning. The corridors we wandered grow dim, their lanterns guttering out one by one. Those souls of the past, having unburdened themselves in our hearing, now recede gratefully into the quiet oblivion of time. We close the heavy palace doors, leaving each royal ghost to slumber. All that remains is a sense of connection, a thread of empathy linking us to them. The secret side of royal history, once erased or ignored, has gently come alive for a while in our imagination, and now it returns to silence, but not entirely lost, for we carry the understanding with us. Outside, the first light of dawn might be glowing, or perhaps it's the dusk of our waking world. Time feels slow and kind right now. We can let ourselves drift, knowing that even the mightiest figures in history had their midnight reveries and hidden tears. In that knowledge, there is comfort. Human hearts have always yearned for love and meaning, whether crowned in gold or tucked in humble corners. As you ease into sleep, imagine the halls of history growing dark and still, everyone finally at peace. The lady-in-waiting has laid down her lantern. The chronicler has set aside his quill. The palace hushes. And in that gentle darkness, all those long-forgotten hopes and sorrows float like stars, quiet and eternal. Tonight, we have listened to them with compassion and without judgment. In doing so, we honor the lullabies of the ages, the boring, beautiful history that sings softly beneath the grand symphonies. Let those lullabies carry you now into your own peaceful slumber, where no secret needs to be hidden, and all stories find their gentle end. Good night.